Good evening, everyone. It's 6:30. Call the Urban Design Commission to order. Today is November 9th. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Sahil?
Here.
Mr. Winchester?
Here.
Mr. Condon?
Here.
Mr. Leonetti?
Here.
Mr. Miller?
Here.
Ms. Morse?
Here.
Ms. Sullivan must be running late, and Ms. Ream has been excused. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. The next item on the agenda are the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve minutes for September 14th, 2016 and September 28th, 2016? Mr. Sahil, we have a motion. Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. Sahil, will speak to your motion.
Mr. Chair, I don't intend to pull any of the minutes. They look fine.
Great. Anybody, Mr. Miller? Seeing no opposition, it passes. Thank you. Next are disclosures. Mr. Winchester, do you have any disclosures for tonight?
No.
Mr. Sahil?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In case 2016-0124, the context-sensitive design solutions for Spenard Road, our firm is working on that project, and I will not be participating. I have a conflict of interest.
Okay. Great. Can we get a motion to have Mr. Sahil participate? If everybody remembers, this is the backwards way of making a motion. Oh, Ms. Sullivan has arrived. Hello. Ms. Morse, thank you for the motion. We get a second. Mr. Miller, thank you. Ms. Morse, you speak to your motion?
Although I moved to, how do I do this? I moved to direct Mr. Sahil to participate. That's all.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Miller, like to speak?
No, I second that.
All right. And everybody remember, this is to vote for the conflict of interest. Thank you. Start voting. Great. Thank you, Mr. Sahil. You're directed not to participate. Ms. Morse, conflicts?
No conflict.
I do not have any as well. Mr. Miller?
Yes, in the case of 2016-0124, I am working on a project with the petitioner's representative, a separate project exclusive from this one, but we are working on that one together.
So that's the municipality of Anchorage?
That would be Bettisworth North.
Okay, and are you participating in the projects on the docket tonight?
No.
Okay, so I don't see that that's a conflict. I don't think we need to.
It's a disclosure, though.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Condon?
No.
Thank you. Ms. Sullivan, disclosures? Great, thank you. Moving on to C2, which is the UDC safety approval for 1% for art for Airport Heights Elementary School. Do we have a report from staff?
Zena didn't inform me whether or not she was going to be here this evening, so it doesn't look as though she is here.
Okay. I was on that committee, so if anybody has any questions, I'm not really prepared to do a presentation, but I can certainly field some questions. There's basically 3 locations for art. 2 were inside, 1 was outside. It was a great process. Anybody have any questions?
Yes.
Yes, Ms. Sullivan. Oh.
So I was looking at the Airport Heights Elementary, and the interior has suspended wood ceiling as part of the art. I just want to note that they need to take a peek into the sprinklers above and below the ceiling, just for safety. It's a code requirement, and sometimes the 1% for art doesn't count on the budget, the double sprinklers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. So can I get anybody else have any other questions, comments? Oh, Ms. Morse. Who?
My concern was also seconded in safety, just in addition to the sprinklers, the seismic restraint for that ceiling portion. Was that considered during the design, or was the artist informed?
Seismic constraints for which?
Seismic restraint, so restraining it seismically, that ceiling portion.
It was, the architect was in the committee, participated throughout the whole process, and it didn't come up, but I suspect that it's part of the process. Certainly wouldn't hurt to just mention it.
Okay.
Okay. No other comments? Can I get a motion to recommend approval for the 1% for art? Actually, acceptance. Ms. Sullivan, thank you. A second. Ms. Morris, thank you. Ms. Sullivan, you speak to your motion?
No comments.
Thank you. Ms. Morse?
Would like it to be in the record that we encourage the artist doing the wood ceiling to look at safety requirements for that installation.
Okay. Duly noted. Thank you. Anybody else have any opposition? Seeing none, that passes. Thank you. Okay, so now we're on to C3, which is UDC review and recommendation to the Planning and Zoning Commission for case 20160-127 land use plan map. I see Mr. Davis is over there. Mr. Davis, would you like to do a presentation?
Yes, thank you. This request is for the Urban Design Commission to provide written comments as a body to the Planning and Zoning Commission and an Anchorage Assembly regarding this draft plan. The Planning and Zoning Commission begins deliberations this coming Monday, November 14th. They will, however, just be getting started, so we figure they will continue to their regular meeting on December 5th, and I imagine also to the 12th, but certainly to the 5th, which comments from the Urban Design Commission, if the Commission can approve some recommendations as a body this evening. What we can do is make any modifications to whatever materials you're working with. I know we had a working starter draft resolution for you to work off or build on, but it could also be a letter or what have you. We will keep track of those and bring those back to the chair prior to the December 5th meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission for signatures so that we can provide that to the Commission, Planning and Zoning. And those recommendations will also be provided to the Assembly. The Planning Department has received about 150 pages of comments from a cross-section of the public about the public hearing draft, and also comments from public agencies, comments from several other commissions that also advise the Planning and Zoning Commission. Geotechnical Advisory Commission is pending. Anchorage Watersheds Commission has provided its comments. We're also following up with the Parks Commission. Hand Commission has also reviewed it. They provide some verbal comments. And so each commission has its own realm of expertise, and urban design is certainly part of the Anchorage 2040 land use plan map because it's a three-dimensional city, and we believe that urban design does a couple of things for land use in very brief summary. First, by focusing on the compatibility of development and how a new incoming infill project relates to its neighbors in a built neighborhood environment becomes more important when we seek to grow through infill and redevelopment than it was back when Anchorage was growing primarily through greenfields. Much of the growth capacity that we have found in this plan to provide for our housing needs commercial needs, industrial needs, is actually infill on existing lots and built areas. By making development as compatible as possible, this actually allows for more development to occur than we believe it would otherwise. By compatible, we don't mean the same. We don't mean the exact same scale. We don't mean exact same use. But we look at factors of how a development, even if it does have a different scale, or amount, intensity, it is in using the magic of design, becoming as compatible, sensitive as possible. That's the first way. The second way we believe urban design plays a big role in providing for growth is that through this plan and in other plans, we're looking to concentrate more public services and infrastructure in certain parts of town, making a public investment. For example, the Public Transit Department is making plans to propose several options for concentrating public bus transit service in a way that we haven't seen before in Anchorage, which would in certain parts of town yield up to 15-minute headways for buses through most of the day throughout the week. This and other investments we believe are essential in order to be able to support growing through infill and redevelopment in parts of town where today we see a lot of underutilized lots, we see a lot of surface parking. The improvements to the infrastructure, walking, transit, trail connections, and other services we believe are essential to support growth. On the other side of the coin, the design of those facilities and the design of the private development on the property also are essential for making that work. If the public facilities can be especially pedestrian oriented, obviously still providing for the automobile traffic, and if the design of the development on the lot can also really respond to and leverage that complete street environment by focusing on the street, on the pathways, and orienting to the pedestrian environment, we believe, and evidence shows, that the actual amount of development that can be supported by that environment and the transit is actually far greater than what you can do in a very suburban, auto-oriented environment. We believe it turns underutilized land in some percent, 5, 10, 15% of the parking lots we see today, into free land. It's not free. Obviously, we have to invest in the public investments, and we have to all agree on what are the urban design guidelines that we adhere to. But we believe, in the end, that urban design is essential to land use and meeting our housing, commercial needs in the next 25 years through 2040. So we're all ears for what you may have to say about urban design, but that doesn't limit the commission to design-related comments. A couple of the comments from commissioners from the last go-around. For example, from Mr. Miller, did have some changes in the plan based on his response and other response of others. We changed the name of the plan because we found it wasn't very descriptive of what we were talking about. It's a 2040 plan. It's not a map. It's a plan. It has a map, but it's not just a map. It's a plan. We hopefully sent to you all the memo detailing the request and trying to cut to the chase and identify some parts of the plan that were most directly, we found, related to urban design. And we also provided a starter draft resolution, which of course staff wrote it, so you guys are shown as supporting the plan. But the intent here is that it's a technical assistance to you all, and our intent is for, when we send out the Word copy for this commission, to just build on it and change it to say what UDC would like to say. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great, thank you for the presentation. Yes, we did get both of those attachments, and then there was also an actual hard copy of the map in the printout. And I think now's a good time to just me explain a little bit here that tonight is a pretty interesting night on what we have for our case packets. We have this huge plan in front of us, land use plan, and then we have a road, which is in its essence part of this plan, and then we have a variance, which is in essence part of the plan as well. And it's pretty unique, at least in my experience on the commission, to have those three in one meeting. So without further ado, who has comments or questions? Ms. Sullivan.
Hi. I did like the way that it was organized and that the policies of 2020 were first, and then you are kind of filling the gaps after with the 2040. So that's super easy to understand, and they really fill the gaps. I like when you go after walkable surfaces and connecting. That's one of the biggest issues that we had as a commission, is trying to add sidewalks. You know, there's the problem with the state that have projects without budget, and then we have municipality having issues maintaining landscape, and it's just, I'm just wondering, it seems like there's never money for the walk-in surface. And this is encouraging that we do walk-in surface and we connect the city. I'm just wondering if, how could we deal with mandatory requirements for development, and also where the budget will come from, and if it's possible that there's for sure budget for all this walkable surface and improving the landscape and the city.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. In short, at the moment, there isn't enough money for all the development that's recommended in the plan. And much of the bowl doesn't have the existing pedestrian infrastructure. We do have factors maps we've developed to this plan to illustrate where the walking infrastructure is. And it's in areas, as you can probably imagine, where it is around downtown and what have you. This is a 40-year plan. Excuse me, it's a 25-year plan through 2040. And we don't imagine that it will develop all at once and everywhere. And so our game plan is phasing and focusing combined investments in certain strategic areas to try to create to catalyze a sort of a magic between a number of elements. The very last map on page 67, actions map, illustrates in purple, dark purple, 3 areas where the plan recommends focusing first. It's very hard to read at this scale. There is a zoom-in version online. The 3 areas are basically the middle of Spenard, near Chugach Way, in the downtown CBD, basically in the southwest portion of the CBD, and then part by popular demand, in eastern South Addition and western Fairview, including the Gamble Street. But among those 3, we believe there's greatest potential in the immediate term, in middle Spenard, in downtown. And these are called reinvestment focus areas. We also identify which transit supportive corridors, if the transit department does successfully reorganize its route system to focus primarily in northern Anchorage. We label the transit supportive development corridors on that map 1 through 7, I believe. And those are our phasing priority order. So we certainly don't have the funding and wherewithal to convert all 7 of these corridor segments into great streets for transit with the surrounding land use all at once. So we're going to pick them off 1 or 2 at a time. Phasing also allows us to grow at a rate that the economy is really growing. So at the moment, of course, things feel pretty grim. And this plan, but through its phasing, allows us to grow and invest at a rate in an amount of areas that that match our resources and our growth rate. We also have a number of actions to try to seek more funding, but I would say this is a plan that tries to take a strategic approach. And in the end, we believe that there's no way around in investing in that pedestrian infrastructure. If we are to grow as a city, it's going to be through infill and redevelopment. And if we're going to do that, we believe that some of the parking has to go away. But in order for 15% or 10% of trips to be by walking and to make that growth possible, we need to invest in that infrastructure. So it's hard to afford, but we're not sure we can afford not to.
Thank you. Did that answer your question? I think that this is definitely not a financial, I mean, it's not a budget by any means for any sort of element in this project, so it's a matter of having the standard and then boards and commissions like this one to
Yes.
not encourage, but, basically uphold this
I know.
as projects come through. I mean, that's part of our role here.
Yeah, and then just one more recommendation, maybe emphasizing a little connectivity between neighborhoods and schools. That's another of the issues that we have often at the Urban Design Commission.
Great, okay. Duly noted. Mr. Davis? Yep, okay. Anything else? Ms. Sullivan? Cool. Ms. Morse?
Thank you, Chair. As the 2 architect duo continues this evening, I did send you a few comments via email. I copied the whole commission on it. Just to kind of clarify, I had 3 points. One of them's on page 55. The topic is the zoning districts, and the language, I think, needs to be slightly stronger to allow for an easier path to rezoning. If we are encouraging rezoning, I think we need more teeth in the fact that the owner of the property not take on so much of the financial responsibility if they really are trying to align with the goal of the city. So if we can somehow alleviate a cost impact or try to accommodate them, I know you're trying to stay away from rezoning the city, but if we can support that rezoning a little bit better in this plan, I would like to see that.
So are you asking that the plan to define which zones can be rezoned and not rezoned? Because currently P&Z does rezones, and there's no limit. Anybody can rezone.
Right.
No matter if they...
There's just a cost impact to the owner. And so in here it says they're not recommending a bowl-wide rezoning.
What page, sorry?
55, it's under strategy 4. It says, instead, where existing zoning does not line up with the land use plan designation, individual rezonings can occur over time as property owners determine they're ready to develop and as the need arises. So they're pretty much saying, we want you to rezone, but we're not going to support you in any way, shape, or form. I would just like to see, as personally as an architect, as a developer, and as a client representative, that we do a little bit more for people that want to follow the plan of the city. Maybe there's an incentive or a time savings because it's already been vetted with the land use plan that they don't have to wait the same amount of time. If there's some sort of incentive that we could put in this plan, I'd like to see that. And maybe that's not a comment as an urban design commissioner, just as a private citizen. I don't know.
Well, now would be the time to mention that if you want it to be part of UDC, and as we make this motion in a couple of minutes, if it's not a condition in there, then it will not be part of.
And I think that's something that I'd like the rest of the commission to vote on, is if they agree with me or not. So I'm putting it out there. If not, it can be an individual comment, but I'd like the board to consider it, or the commission to consider it. The second one was on page 25.
What, can we talk about that a little bit more just as a group before we move on to that? I mean,
Through the chair.
so I'm a little confused on your intent. So if the zone is, let's say, R3 right now, and it changes to R4, which it wouldn't, but your concern in in this new plan, it has an overlay zoning, and then after a certain time frame, it would change that zoning district, and therefore the owners of that lot would not want to do that and change it to something else. Is that what you're referring to? Because to me, it's pretty clear in here.
The
that-
overlay zoning of the land use plan map does not change the actual zoning of the land. So even though this plan map is encouraging us to be in R4 in your example,
right?
If they want to build to the zoning or the allowable floor area of an R4 and they can't get to that in an R3, the owner of the land has to pay to do a rezone and wait the 30 days. There's a cost and time impact to the owner, even though they're trying to follow this map that the city has spent a lot of money to develop.
Right.
We're not giving them any incentive to follow the map because they still have to do the same process they had to before this map was a thing.
So what percentage of this map are we talking about? That 1%, 10%, 20%?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it's a low percent. However, some of the areas are quite strategic and are important. There are, for example, in the Middle Spinard area is currently zoned R2M, and our designation would be happy with, for example, an R4A or mixed use. And Commissioner Morris is correct. There are parts of this map where we're supporting a change in the land use. It would require a change in zoning. Those areas of the map, as it states here, there isn't stated any incentive process for many of those rezonings. And we believe it's a great comment. It's a comment we've received from several other folks, and we're actually trying to figure out how to respond to that and to that issue and see what can be done. And so we're happy to have it either as an individual comment or from the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Great. Did that answer your question?
I have two more
Go ahead.
comments. Okay. On page 25, on the bottom right of the page, it says design principles for relationship to surrounding neighborhoods. That first point, it says gradual decreases in building height, mass, and scale so that new structures provide a transition to smaller scale, lower density neighborhoods. Great theory. I think we just need to make it a bit more succinct. So if we could delete the first half of the sentence, so it just says new developments provide a transition to existing smaller scale, lower density neighbors, it would be more fitting and then allow for a wider interpretation. So we're not controlling the height and the mass and the scale. We're just providing a transition to the neighbors of the property. So that's, I don't like driving the architecture. I like contextual decision making. So that was one of those. It stuck out where we're really driving the design there.
Yes, I see your point, and so the language, as I understand you suggested, would read, new developments would provide a transition to smaller scaled, lower density neighborhoods. Just to read more simply. Okay, thank you.
And then the last one was on page 33, and this is, again, probably up for debate. Under the downtown area, you mention a minimum of 3 stories. I believe is what you said for downtown, and I would like to push your expectation to 4 stories.
Sorry, what page were you on again?
Page 33, under the
33,
downtown.
city center downtown. Okay, so this is under the city center section.
Yes,
So
I'm
cities.
looking for the requirement because I wrote this in an email.
If I may, Mr.
Yeah, go ahead.
Chair, it's the page 33 in the third column, I think far right column under the subheading of character, if I'm not
Oh,
mistaken.
there it was. So under character, it says buildings are typically 2 to 20 stories is what our plan is suggesting. And I think when you think about how long a building lasts, especially when you build it in a downtown area, and you look at the buildings that have been demolished in downtown in the last few years, they are 2-story buildings. I think we want to push our developments, especially in our downtown, to be a bit taller. So I would consider moving that up to 3 or even 4 stories. Because they're going to be
the
around
minimum.
for a while.
The minimum being 3 instead of 2. So
Exactly.
3 to 20 stories or 4 to 20 stories.
Yeah, move up the minimum because those buildings will be there for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the buildings that we can't get around at this point. So it's just an encouraging of denser development.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions? Seeing, yep, Mr. Miller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a couple of questions for Tom, but also a question on process. So Tom asked for the Urban Design Commission to either provide a letter or a resolution of comments. So I guess my question to the commission is, how do we document those comments in something that we can give to staff so they can move it on to the Planning and Zoning Commission?
Ideally, we, in my mind anyway, and you guys can correct me if I'm out of line here, we just make a motion to approve or recommend this to move forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. We're just advising the Planning and Zoning Commission. So it would be just a condition of our advice.
So Tom, are you looking for specific comments from us or just our blessing? Or both?
Both. And I've been attempting to document, we have the recording, and so far I have 2 items from Commissioner Sullivan, 3 items from Commissioner Morris, and so far, and I might need some help here from Sharon, but I mean, one possibility, if that were to work, is that I attempt to write these up based on the recording and add them into a revised reso.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one possibility.
Well,
What might be some others?
That's the only suggestion I would have, unless, you had a resolution and then you had sort of a list of their comments, UDC's comments, that was appended, attached to the reso, but usually they're all in the resolution.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think we just take this resolution of approval and add our comments to the end of it, and we'll vote. And if people don't want that on as a resolution, then it doesn't go on.
Okay, so then do we need to discuss Commissioner Sullivan's and Commissioner Morse's comments individually?
Well, what'll happen is if anybody has questions, we'll ask the questions of staff, and then those questions will get answered. And if there's dialogue, we'll have dialogue, and then I'll ask for a motion to approve, and then we'll get a second. And then we go into discussion after that, then they'll be added as conditions if somebody decides to add them as conditions.
Right. So are we going to document those in writing as a commission? Okay. So I do have just 2 questions for you, Tom. As I was going through this and saw there's a heavy emphasis on vacant properties, and I was curious about blighted properties, and that's the old decrepit buildings. And first off, your opinion, do you think that addressing blighted properties specifically, does that have a place in this particular plan, this 25-year plan? I know it's in ordinance, but do you think that it should be addressed directly in the plan?
And just so that I'm clear, you're not referring just to the redevelopable properties that maybe are underutilized. You're referring specifically to blights, properties that are a problem. Is that correct?
That's right. So the standard of that is the Northern Lights Hotel, and it's been in the news recently, and it's been a problem. The owners don't want to do anything with it. The city doesn't have really any ability to address it. Do you think that addressing blighted properties specifically in the plan is beneficial, or should that be just relegated to code?
Well, in the case of the Northern Lights, then, just building from that example, the property owner, the mobile home park to the south, would like to redevelop, and the Northern Lights Inn has some effect on the desirability of his development site, and in that sense is affecting its surrounding neighbors' ability to develop. If the commission wishes to ask of the plan to include a policy or discussion about addressing blighted properties and how they may be affecting the ability of the neighbors or the area to meet the goals of the plan, then we that certainly can take that as a comment or recommendation of the commission, and for all of these comments, we will accompany the comment of will provide the commission's comment to the Planning and Zoning Commission, but we also provide a staff analysis and issue response, and in some cases we identify exactly where in the plan we could stick in a policy or adjust language in response to that comment. So I don't think I mentioned that, but an issue response document will seek to study that thought, that possible issue with the blighted properties. I'd be inclined to see what other cities do in their plans, see if that's relevant to Anchorage, see if it's an issue, and document the issue and possibly result in a policy. There are places in this plan of policies about a variety of land use related issues. So,
okay, thanks. And then the second comment that I had is regarding the plan sort of you talk about jobs and housing and transit, and kind of addresses those things separately on some occasions and combines them in some ways and in others, and that kind of speaks to the idea of new urbanism. And is that what you're trying to get at with the plan here? And it didn't really address jobs so much as with housing and transit.
The question is, if I could restate, do you want to include jobs as part of this land use plan? And I think that's more of a comp 2020 plan. But Tom, go ahead and fill in there.
Well, employment jobs is a part of this plan, and our goals, our land use pattern in this plan is data driven in part by how much space we have available for industrial export sectors in the bowl. We need about 600 odd acres. Looks like even with this plan we're eking by with maybe 200 to 300 acres. We relate employment jobs to acres, and so yeah, jobs is very much a part of this plan. With respect to jobs along transit routes, and we believe the more new urbanist or complete street environment makes it possible to put more floor space in the same amount of land, and I think downtown's a great example of an area with high floor area ratios a lot more employment per acre than, suburban areas. So I'm not sure where I'm going with that or whether that answers your question, but.
Does it answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine. I wasn't really clear if that was the direction of the plan or if it was just kind of a, applied, exactly. Okay, thanks, Tom.
Mr. Condon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to commend you on the sort of general direction that this land use plan is taking. I like the densification strategy that you've got. That's in sort of the Jane Jacobs tradition. I think that's good that you're pushing that forward. I also like the fact that you're emphasizing the green belts and want to preserve these, in the Olmsted tradition. But I'm wondering if there shouldn't be a provision somewhere in this land use plan that takes into account safety of people walking through the green belt. We've had some incidents along the trail recently, and I think historically it has simply been sort of a self-patrolled civilian sort of eyes on the trail kind of safety enforcement strategy. Perhaps there needs to be some kind of provision for enhanced security. Because if those green belts become, I don't want to say blighted, but if they degenerate to a point where they become a hangout for criminal behavior, then they're going to be a great detriment to Anchorage. And in order to maintain the greenbelt and the integrity of the greenbelt, I think there should be some kind of provision for safety.
Could you expand a little bit more, Condon, on what you're referring to as enhanced security?
Yes, I would suggest that you have people walking the trail, security people who get out of their patrol car once in a while and actually walk along the trail, which I have never witnessed a law enforcement officer walking along the trail there as safety. And this, I think, needs to perhaps change.
Great. So, Mr. Davis, did you have a comment to that? The question was, could there be enhanced security? And
Well, we do in the plan under Goal 5 address and Goal 6 having to do with infrastructure and services. What kind of infrastructure and services do we need to support the city? And it does get into operations and maintenance in that we're going to have more people walking and more trails, more walkways, sidewalks, that there's greater operations and maintenance. In that sense, security is in some sense a part of that, if that needs to be. I'm also generally aware of environmental design, which I thought that's where you were going with the design of our open spaces, but maybe that's different from what you're focusing on. But I certainly see the plan has the scope to accommodate that type of comment.
great, thank you. Anything else, Mr. Condon?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Great. Mr. Sawhill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my comment and concern is implementation of some of the growth supporting features. One of the growth supporting features is transit supported development, and the description of the transit supported development is in conflict with some of the existing zoning that's along those corridors. And I was looking in the strategies, trying to figure out, what the strategy was to encourage development that is compatible with the vision for the transit-supported corridors. We have strategy 5, which is new zoning districts, overlay zones, and the same kind of question or concern is the same with the mixed-use developments. How do we encourage those? What happens if someone comes in and they're conformance with their zoning, but they're in conflict with the land use plan? What happens then?
Well, to start out with, once it's adopted, is to start out with the land use plan gets adopted, and the zoning and the development rights and entitlements under the zoning map remain the same. The property is unaffected. So while we designate a number of transit supportive corridors on this plan, it doesn't really affect if someone's zoned R1, R2M, or what have you, B3. They're still going forward under that. Where it would have effect is probably, hopefully, if and when street improvements go forward, it can affect prioritization of the design features of that street and the infrastructure. But with respect to the property development zoning, there's a couple action items under Goal 6 in the actions table on page 64. 6-3 is a transit supportive development corridor kind of implementation plan, which AMATS is pretty excited about carrying out as part of their upcoming Metropolitan Transportation Plan update. City Transportation Plan. And then later on down the road, 6-5 would be a more specific action item to actually adopt an overlay zone or put one on the books. So let's say we put an overlay zone on the books. That would require a rezoning of an area. Then the overlay zone would float over the base zoning. And I guess there might be some carrots and sticks involved in that. Another route to all this may be that, like the Spenard Corridor Plan that Nori Winter and Company is preparing with AMATS. If I'm not mistaken, that they take a different thinking out of the box approach. Down in Arizona, they've done this. In other places, they've created an adaptive reuse ordinance, where in this area where they want to redevelop and orient towards transit and revitalize it, they make it easier to reuse old buildings as a stepping stone to yielding the new urbanist environment that might be a long-range dream. Whereas the base zoning ordinance may make it difficult to reuse that old building because there are new parking requirements or whatever else, So that it may not be necessarily be all sticks. It might be a carrots as well.
Well, I think it has to be both, and we really need to reach, outside the right-of-way. The adoption of a transit-supported oriented development plan is a great step. I think that's more focused to the right-of-way. I just see us missing opportunities very quickly, and once they go away, it's going to be hard to reel them back in.
Could you elaborate on that? What type of opportunities might we?
Well, I think one of the next segments of our city that's going to redevelop is Spenard Road between 36th and Benson. There's a lot of interest there with Cook Inlet housing, and I think as their stuff goes forward, I'm hoping that some of the neighbors get excited about what's going on there. And I would just, we have a pretty clear vision of what a transit-supported corridor should be, especially right along the corridor, and it would be nice to get something in place to allow and encourage that development before parcels redevelop and we lose them. So that was my thought. So some kind of an overlay zone I think would work, but that's a tricky thing. You're rezoning people's property on one level, but on another level you're just giving them more opportunities and keeping their base zoning rights. But I know you guys got a lot of things to work on, and prioritization's important, and I don't know how you get to them all. So that's all I had. Thank you.
Great. Go ahead, Ms. Davis. Were you going to say something? Nope. Okay. Great, Mr. Sell. Thank you. Anybody else? I just had two. One was, if you're real simple, are you anticipating printing this document? I know we have a hard copy right here, but is it going to be a printed thing? The reason for asking the question is that when you read through it, it's like, oh, go check online at such and such. And I presume that's part of the draft, and the real deal will be all encompassed in one bound document.
Well, we do intend to, in the old school fashion, print whatever final version the Assembly adopts of the plan as you see it. It includes about 6 appendices, one of which is this really cool map folio document. The printed final version, what we hope to do is have where a map is available online, that it provides a clear, easier way to get to that online, because I just can't match the scale and visibility of a zoom-in map in here. My dream would be to have the PDF version of this online, having the PDF having those live hyperlinks, and you could click on those and zip around.
So it sounds like the intent is to have an online document, and then the backup would just be a printed version of it.
Yes, both, depending on the user, what they're doing. But there will be some documents that are separate, remain separate. The map folio is going to have about 2 dozen, maybe up to, 25 maps in it. Natural hazards, community character. We did this great map of community character. Actually, I used the Royal We, our public transit planner did it. And it characterized the different parts of Anchorage, the urban neighborhoods, the suburban neighborhoods, the rural neighborhoods. And that formed a basis for our traditional neighborhood design growth supporting feature that appears as a brown outline. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of cool maps in that. The whole thing's 11 by 17 printed, so it's really hard to fit in this.
Yeah.
So it's separate.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Great. Thanks. And then on the bottom of the printed scaled map, it shows a little time frame, and it shows Assembly, public hearing, and adoption at the end. What do you anticipate for that? What kind of schedule are we looking for having this finalized?
We are working hard to support the Planning and Zoning Commission getting this done for their part in December.
Right.
And I believe they seem to be on track towards that program. If the Planning and Zoning Commission finishes, let's say in early mid-December, we would flip that around and would send it to the Assembly. Realistically, if we don't get it to the Assembly till mid-December, we're really looking at a January type of start for the Assembly. So I'm hoping January, February for the Assembly process.
Great. And so then is it a public hearing for the Assembly as well? Or is it just P&Z that has a public hearing?
Absolutely, the Assembly as well.
Okay, so then that could take a little time as well, so maybe March, April-ish.
We've got a wild feather this time. We also putting in our work program the ability to monitor and update this plan. We have a lot of now action items. So within a year, we would come back and update, keep the plan a living document and update it so we avoid the situation we have right now where we have a 34-year-old city land use plan.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you. So now we have, if I could get a motion to approve case number 2016127, the land use plan map. Waiting for a motion. And what this motion, thank you, Mr. Miller. Get a second. Ms. Sullivan, thank you. Mr. Miller, can you speak to your motion?
Yes, I move to, in the case of 2016027, land use plan map, I move to approve.
Great, thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion? Was that just speaking to it?
Nope, that was just the motion. Yeah, I'll be happy to speak to it. I think you guys did an admirable job putting this map together, or this plan together. It entails a lot of vision and obviously quite a bit of hard work, and I think Anchorage desperately needs it. I would like to add a condition. I guess they're conditions, aren't they?
Condition of approval, yep. You're speaking to your motion.
Yeah, and I'd like to add that you address blighted properties somewhere in section 3.2. I don't want to tell you where, but I think in looking through it, I think that's where it should fit. I don't want to get too far into the weeds. I'd rather have you decide where you want to put it, if you want to put it anywhere, but just consider it. That's all. Thanks.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Go ahead.
butt in a little here? I would like to suggest that we use the resolution, draft resolution that was provided by staff.
Great.
And then under item B, it would be subject to the following comments instead of recommendations. And then I think we should add our list of comments at that point for the commission to hear. And we have Mr. Miller's comments so far, and then maybe we want to take each commissioner's comments one at a time and then vote at them as an amendment to a motion. That might work for us and get us through this.
Okay. So right now you're speaking to the main motion, and then after that, typically we have the seconder speak to the motion, and then after that we amend with voters.
To add comments.
To add comments, right. So if you're done speaking to your motion, we're good?
Well, how about I'll add some findings of fact.
Sure.
Okay. 2 findings of facts. Anchorage 2040 Land Use Plan is an essential element of the comprehensive plan and will guide land use and development standards for the next 25 years. Also, the plan includes consideration of urban design features and incorporates compatibility elements to ensure that these are factored into future infrastructure and developments guided by this plan.
Great. Thank you. And now, Ms. Sullivan, if you could speak to the second on the main motion.
I'm good. I agree with what Commissioner Sawhill proposed.
Great. Thank you. So now, if somebody would like to speak to the main, add comments, or would like to speak on the case right now, just hit your button, and we'll go down that path.
Yeah, I don't have any comments. Mine were mainly just recommendations, like more connectivity with schools and maybe more mandatory requirements for development
So are those
when it comes to sidewalks.
Would you like to make those as conditions?
I guess yes.
Okay, so then just make. Oh, we have a motion. There we go. Now, if you could make a motion to amend.
You
Ms. Sullivan.
Okay, I'm making a motion to amend.
You get to use your button.
Push that little button on the screen there.
Sorry.
Thank you. We get a second. Thank you. So the motion to amend is basically to include connectivity to schools, and the second was,
More mandatory requirements for development of sidewalks.
thank you. Did you want to speak to those? You already did.
I did already.
Ms. Morse?
I'm in support of this amendment.
Great, thank you. Any other discussion?
No.
Any opposition? Seeing none, those two are on there. So now we're on number 3. Would anybody like to add? So, Ms. Morse, go ahead, state your motion.
I would like to add an amendment to incentivize change in zoning that matches the land use plan, the 2040 land use plan, alleviating the cost impacts from the private developers and supporting the city's goal development. Should I do them as 3 separate?
Yeah. Yep. So if we get a second to the motion to incentivize changing in the zoning, Mr. Sahil, thank you. Ms. Morse, would like to speak to your motion?
I think I've beat that horse already.
Mr. Sahil?
I'll be supporting the motion, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Any opposition? None. That motion passes. Thank you. Number 4, if we have a fourth. Ms. Morse, go ahead.
Number 5, I guess.
4.
4, is it 4?
Yep.
Sidewalks and schools were together?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to amend the downtown development requirements in the land use plan to encourage downtown developments to be no less than 4 stories instead of the 2 as currently stated.
Great. Can we get a second? Still waiting for a second. Oh, Ms. Sullivan. Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion, Ms. Morse?
I think it's a great idea. We need density.
Okay. Ms. Morse, you good?
I'm in support of it.
Any opposition? Seeing none? Okay, that passes. On to 5.
Number 5 is it's kind of just a formality. The sentence on page 25 under infill design principles for surrounding neighborhoods, to synthesize that statement in the first bullet, remove the first half of the sentence, and instead we'll read, new developments provide a transition to existing smaller scale, lower density neighborhoods.
Thank you for the second, Mr. Sahil. Any opposition? Would you like to discuss, Ms. Morse?
I'm done.
Can you repeat that one? Sorry.
Yes.
New development. So maybe if it's a page in bullet reference, it was page 25. There's only
First bullet, page 25, first bullet under infill design principles for surrounding neighborhoods. Remove the first half of the sentence in the first bullet. Instead, we'll read, new developments provide a transition to existing smaller scale, lower density neighborhoods.
Great, thank you. Any opposition? Seeing none, that goes. That was number 5. Anything else, Ms. Morse?
That's all I got.
Great, thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Condon, did you have any?
No, Mr. Chair, I think that my comments are more just a recommendation to consider.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Miller, oh, I missed somebody. Anybody else?
I'm good.
Mr. Winchester?
you, Mr. Chair. I had one final question, and that was, I've been absorbing everything that people are bringing forward. In the downtown district, it doesn't seem to address to me what the intent is for public parking and how we're going to address the issue of parking downtown. Am I missing something there? I mean, I've been diving through this thing.
Mr. Davis, can you
If
respond
you
to
don't
that,
mind.
please?
I know we're in the middle of a motion, but
Right,
I
yep.
would like to potentially add something in that area.
No, it does not. If it's important, it can certainly be something that the commission can recommend including in allowed uses or in the discussion as you find necessary.
Okay. With that, I would
Yep.
like to add another item that the comprehensive plan must address the need for public parking in the downtown area that does not require parking of any of the structures under the normal building codes, and provide that parking in order to facilitate the vibrant downtown that we intend to have. We cannot depend just on public transportation to get everybody downtown.
Okay, so your
Maybe
your
that's
motion.
too verbose, sorry.
Yeah, so Sling.
Suppose that we address public parking in the downtown and the city center areas
Okay.
and
We get a second?
mandating that gets developed as a part
Incorporated.
of this.
Yep. Great. We get a second. Wait, which button, Mr.
Oh, I guess I got a motion, sorry.
Second from Mr. Condon. Great. Thank you. Any discussion? Anybody? Nope. Seeing none. So that is number 6. Great. Thank you. So if anybody else has any comments, I don't think we do, then if we could go to, I need to restate this, don't I?
We're going to let you off the hook.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
So we have a motion to approve, or recommend approval to the Planning and Zoning Commission for case number 2016-0127 land use plan map with 6 conditions as stated earlier. We get everyone to vote, please. Oh, Mr. Davis, did you have a question? I see your button here.
Sorry to interject. I had a couple of more comments, and I just wanted to make sure that the folks who made them didn't need them in the resolution. The first being the addressing blighted properties, or maybe I missed that, and then the second one being a couple from Mr. Sawhill regarding the growth supporting features, particularly transit supported corridors. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah, so
we don't miss anything. That
thank you for bringing those both back up. I think the intention was if it was going to be included, they would have mentioned it. And if I'm wrong, people can speak up. But that was the intention during the motion. So I think that those were discussion items prior and not move forward to the Planning and Zoning Commission. Thank you for bringing those back up again, though. Okay, so now we're back to the motion on the floor with 6 conditions. So if we could get a vote, please. Everyone vote. Great, that motion passes. Thank you, everyone. And Mr. Davis, I understand you need this expedited, so just shoot me an email and I can meet up with you and sign it if you need it sooner than next month. Great, thank you. So, good job, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Let's go to actually, if we could take a 5-minute recess, that would be great. Be back in 5 minutes. Start it again here. The next case is the case number 2016-0124, context-sensitive solutions, transportation project site plan review for Spinard Road, reconstruction phase 2, Hillcrest Drive to Benson Boulevard. And I'll mention that Mr. Sawhill has left the room. So, staff, can we get your report, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair. The MOA Project Management and Engineering is requesting approval of the plans and hands review for Phase 2 of the Spenard Road reconstruction. This section of Spenard Road has one of the highest public transportation usages in Anchorage. The proposal is to convert the current 4-lane undivided two-way roadway into a 3-section with 1 lane in each direction, 3-lane section with 1 lane in each direction with a continuous 2-way left turn lane. Additionally, proposed improvements include the items listed at the top of page 2, those bulleted items. There appears to be space to provide, well, under landscaping, let me back up a little bit. There is limited space in the right-of-way, which limits the opportunity to provide amenities. Street landscaping, where space allows, will consist of tree, shrub, and perennial plantings. New planting beds will be provided where space allows, and in existing landscape beds that will be affected by construction. There appears to be space to provide a decorative fence at the southeast corner of West 27th Avenue. The fence could help to buffer the view of a utility box near the corner. Also at AMH, the existing landscaping, it's approximately 30-inch wide bed between the building and the public parking lot will remain. As for lighting, the street lighting for Phase 2 continues the lighting established in Phase 1 with a custom-colored light green color to those poles. Under transit facilities, bus stops will be redeveloped with a back-of-curb border of imprinted colored concrete, leaner rails or benches, trash receptacles, and lighting. Bus stop lighting will be the typical lighting standard, but with a silver color. The perforated leaning rail is the one selected for the project. Trash receptacles will have dome lids. Bus furnishings will have a silver finish. No bus shelters are provided. Under adherence to a design theme established through local area plans or prior public improvements, the plan complies with this. The petitioner's narrative states that the character of street and landscape improvements is meant to reflect those already constructed on 2 different segments of the road. Existing examples of those include river rock fascia on retaining walls in the oldest section and the internally illuminated wayfinding columns in Phase 1. Also, a theme incorporating a decorative fence has a Quonset hut pattern detail that is repeated in the decorative rail on the decorative planters. There was a comment from our non-motorized transportation coordinator asking for a rectangular rapid flashing beacon. I spoke to our traffic department about that, and they replied that they would install those if a warrant supports it. So what they plan to do is that they will have the electrical conduit installed at this time, or the project will be installing the electrical conduit for it. And the traffic department will be setting up cameras once the project is completed to monitor the number of crossings there. And if it's warranted, they will then install RRFBs. We do have some department recommendations. And I just want to say that I did speak to Mark Kimmerer, the landscape architect for the project, to talk about the provision of the decorative fence at the southeast corner at West 27th Avenue, and I believe he was in agreement with something that could be provided. And finally, I just want to compliment the petitioner's representative on their packet. I thought it was a very comprehensive and very complete packet, and I just want to pass that on.
Great, thank you. We have any questions for staff? Mr. Miller?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Regarding the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, I was wondering why you chose not to include that in your conditions. So with traffic engineering, I guess my question would be, why is frequency of crossing a factor in installing one of those flashing beacons? It seems to me like if one person is at risk, isn't that more than enough to warrant it?
Through the chair, Mr. Miller, the way it works is that they either put down those, they monitor how many people are crossing, and that's what a warrant, it's actually called a warrant. And if there are enough pedestrians crossing a particular intersection, then if it reaches a certain number, then they deem it worthwhile to put it in. Otherwise, they don't do it. And when talking to the traffic department, I didn't put it in the conditions because I believe that they will follow through with what they said they were planning to do. I mean, they recognize the need, that there may be a need to put it in, but until they've actually monitored it, they're not going to put it in unless they see the need for it. But I understand what you're saying. If one person is crossing it, that would seem to warrant a need for it, but it's not how it works.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? I have one, and it revolves around the painted bike lane. Did you guys have any conversations about that? Non-motorized transportation plan or commented on it?
Sorry, are you asking, did I have a conversation with the non-motorized?
Nope. If you had a conversation with the petitioner and if it was omitted for the reasons and...
I can't remember if we talked about this or not.
I can ask.
You'd have to...
Okay. I'll ask. And then, let's see here. That's it for me. So we will... No other questions? So if the petitioner's here, if we could have your presentation now, that'd be great. You have 10 minutes, right? 10 minutes.
Thank you. My name is Mark Kimmer. I'm a landscape architect with Meadowsworth North and the project landscape architect for the Spenard Road reconstruction project.
If you could spell your name for the record, please. Your last name.
M-A-R-K and then last name K-I-M-E-R-E-R.
Thank you.
You guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. First, thanks for hearing the case. Myself and the design team are all very excited to be here to kind of check this box and see this project move forward and hopefully get built next year. That's the intent and the schedule. I'd like to introduce a few more of the design team that may help me out with questions tonight. We have John Smith, PM&E project manager for the project, Jennifer Nofke, PM&E project administrator, Susan Atchison, the civil project engineer with Lounsbury and Associates, and Ann Brooks with Brooks and Associates, our public involvement expert. Camden Yaley is also here from Brooks and Associates. So they'll be my backup if I can't answer some difficult questions. First, I don't want to go on too much about the history of the project. You guys have the packet. It's a long project. It started in 2003, and it's had many starts and stops over the years. Once Mayor Berkowitz was elected to office, the project came back to life rather quickly. It was put on the 2016 bond at a $13.8 million price tag, and the bond was approved, so the project is funded for construction. The purpose of the project is to reconstruct Spenard from Hillcrest. The title says to Benson, but it actually goes a little bit south to 30th Avenue where the ammo can is there. I would like to note that the project alignment is identified as a Transit Supportive Development Corridor in Anchorage 2020. And it also lies on, it's a little fuzzy in Anchorage 2020, but it's kind of lies on the east side of the Spenard Town Center. So I believe you're all very familiar with where this project is and how many people in our city use that area for a lot of the great businesses that are located there. And we really feel like this project is going to give that area the ability to grow into the next 20, 25 years. I think 2037 is actually identified as the lifespan of the project, accommodating traffic to the year 2037. In summary, I can't state how important I feel like this project is to our city as a citizen and somebody who uses that area and has used it for years. I couldn't be more excited to see it become walkable and rideable, essentially a transit supportive development corridor. And I think Anchorage is maybe its first true complete street with transit facilities, all new. Ms. Ferguson mentioned the high ridership of People Mover through there. I think the number is 300,000 per year. So that's pretty amazing to me. Of course, we're making it safer for vehicles. And I'll just go on to a couple of corrections in the packet that I'd like to bring up. On page 21 of your packet, there is a reference, let's see, about the fourth paragraph down. There's a reference to figure 2.4 illustrating the zoning along the corridor. That isn't correct. You don't have a figure 2.4, so it'd be just disregarding that. That was an excerpt from the DSR that I forgot to delete. Next is on pages 70 to 72, the typical cross sections in the packet aren't reflective of the latest, nor of really what was described by Ms. Ferguson, which she did describe it accurately. And I want to reinforce it. It's a 4-lane section going to a 3-lane. There's a 13-foot center turn lane, a northbound and a southbound lane at 11 feet. The project was successful through public involvement and public input to get real 5-foot wide bike lanes on each side of the road. And then above the curb, at the back of curb, 8-foot wide multi-use pathways, which are really 8-foot wide sidewalks. So there's a lot of facility there for hardcore bike riders in the bike lanes, and then bike riders that may not be, or anybody else that wants to use the 8-foot wide pathways at the back of curb. Going through the staff report on page 2 of the staff report under landscaping, it talks a little bit about space available for landscaping. And within the right-of-way, it's actually quite limited for landscape, just space. This is an old section of road. There's some very narrow right-of-way. The beauty of this that I'd like to point out is that working with the business owners beyond the right-of-way, because the reconstruction of the project affects them so significantly, we were able to actually provide betterments right up to their front door, and those betterments include landscape planters, raised planters, which I have images of. You guys may have questions if you haven't quite been able to dissect the package. But I wanted to bring it up because the narrative sort of leans towards saying it's a little minimal, but with the participation of the business owners, we were able to actually kind of expand the landscape and make it very successful in my mind. Not to mention the streetscape amenities that are outlined in the package too, which I can also go through in more detail if you have questions about them. Regarding the next paragraph in landscaping about the decorative fence at the southwest corner of 27th Avenue, that's on the north side of North Rim Bank, and there's a transformer there. And one of the great things about this project is it's realigning 27th Avenue to be a direct crossing intersection instead of sort of that offset scenario that's there now, and it's quite dangerous. And it's caused a lot of accidents. So we're correcting that. We're actually gaining a little more right-of-way on the north side of North Rim. And the suggestion is that there be, we utilize some of our decorative screen fence there to screen that transformer. I would like to note that in working with all the business owners, the number of inebriates along the alignment is a significant issue for business owners there. And I think we all know what that's like in Anchorage. So the intent in that area was to keep it quite open and not provide places for people to be able to crawl behind and sleep, that kind of thing. That was really the reasoning for that. Now, to the recommendation to include a little bit of screen fence there, it certainly could go there. I have an image of what that stuff looks like, which I'll step away and grab.
Just a heads up, you got about a minute and a half left.
Oh, thanks. I'll go faster. So at any rate, you can be the judge of the effectiveness of that screen. You'll see right through it. You'll see the transformer behind it. We can certainly include it, but I'm not sure it's the best application of the screen fence. Moving on. The Coots area. Let's switch to page 4. The parking area in front of Chilcoot's Charlie's and other businesses. There's been a lot of design work done, but specifically, I think in this situation, we've improved that design. And Title 21 does allow, with 45-degree parking in a one-way scenario, a lane as narrow as 12 feet. We actually have 16 feet there. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. And then I'm going to jump right into the department recommendations. These are on page 5 of your package. Recommendation number 1, we're fine with that, no problem at all. Recommendation number 2, resolve issues of site distance triangles, parking stall depth, drive aisle widths. We will continue to improve the design as it moves to 95% and final, but we feel like, I feel like that was specific to that Coots area. So I wanted to clarify there. Do I need to stop or?
Yep. Well, your time's up, but just wrap up here. You're good.
Yep. I just have a couple more.
Yep.
Let's see. Number 3, decorative fence. I spoke to that. We will consider it. I'm not sure it's the best use of it, but we will consider that. And then consider, this is a big one, consider coloring the bike lanes within the intersections. And since we turned the package in and since Ms. Ferguson has had a chance to review it, the design team actually had a meeting with traffic, and it was approved to have at non-signalized intersections dashed bike lanes through those intersections. And at signalized intersections, see if I get this right, about if you're making a right-hand turn, those bike lanes are going to extend out into the intersection 40 to 50 feet. Basically as a visual cue to the driver that if they're doing the right on red or making a right at all, they have a visual cue on the ground that a cyclist may come up and come into their driving pattern. With that, I will open it up to questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Kimmer. Do we have any questions? Mr. Condon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Kimmerer. I really like what you did with the area that's right by Photo Avenue. The detail is on sheet L8. I'm just wondering, is there, I don't see any seating allowed? Is this to discourage inebriates from hanging out and?
Precisely. Yeah, we had a lot of, right across from that on the south side is a transit stop, and then kitty corner to that, a liquor store, and there's lots and lots of inebriate activity going on there. And actually in that area right at the Photo Avenue parking that we're going to work on a little bit, there's some dense shrubs, and there's actually little hidey holes and beds in there. So we consciously made a decision to not make this inviting for seating. The intention of the Photo Avenue parking is to provide potential patrons for the businesses a place to park safely, and then disperse out to where they want to go. So that might be Pizza Olympia or House of Hobbies or the Buckaroo, or even over to REI and some of the shops over there. So another component of that space is on the east side of it, and I have a little perspective here of it. Over here on the east side of it, there's an opportunity for art to be introduced into the project, and within the project budget there's $100,000 allocated for a 1% art application, and Xena with the city art program is going to help utilize that, and that area has been identified as a place where there might be art, sculptures, who knows what.
It seems to me that that location right there, so that's very close to Benson. There's also an area kitty corner to that. It would be southwest, and you show that as just planted with lawn. I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity here to treat that southwest corner in the same way that you're treating the northeast corner, and tie the two areas together so that they communicate across a very busy intersection that could really, I don't know, spark some kind of interest or civic engagement. And I would say, you know, what about the opportunity at Northern Lights in Spenard, where you could conceivably capture two corners there as well? Did you think of that at all?
We did. The property you're talking about on the southwest corner is actually Department of Transportation property, and there's a small building there that's served as kind of document storage for them for many years. It is a little bit of an eyesore. The intention, so this is moving forward, but maybe not quickly enough for this project to capture it, is that building will be abandoned and demolished, and so my understanding of where the property ownership, though, is it will remain in Department of Transportation ownership. So we've been given the go-ahead to kind of at least finish it off with topsoil and seed at the moment. And then I think that vision for what you're talking about was, you know, lights went off in our head. But for this project, we don't think that it's going to hit the timeline quite correctly. And
if I could just clarify real quick, you're talking about on L2, there's Benson and Spenard, just so everybody's on the same page that we're yappering about here. It's the kind of
you might want to look at L1 because
L1?
it gives sort of the bigger picture. Yep. And you can see at Photo Avenue there in Spenard, that's the interesting sort of area that I'm interested in. And then, yeah.
Sorry about, go ahead, Mr. Kamara.
Yes, that is the spot, and I think you've really captured the idea. I think that improvement will take place at some point. I am aware of a trail project on Benson that travels east-west on Benson that will pass through that, and that was also mentioned as a part of that project. So I don't think the value of this space is going to be missed very long. It's just waiting for the Department of Transportation to figure out what to do with it. If they sell it to this, or give it to the city, sell it to the city, maybe sell it to a developer, we're not sure yet.
Okay. And then my second question is about that intersection of Northern Lights and Spenard. If we look at the two northern corners of that intersection, it seems that there's an opportunity there, the same as the opportunity there at Benson and Spenard. Did you consider that at all?
Yes, we're kind of corralled in by private property there. That's where the space in our right-of-way really gets tight. So on the northwest corner, it's the Brown Jug, Plato's Closet, and their parking comes right up that east face of the parking where it says wall Schedule B.
L3 has a good
Yes,
display of
L3. I'm
description
sorry
of
if
it.
you're not looking at L3.
Yeah.
That's the right-of-way line. So we don't have any other than the business owner gratefully working with us, so we can improve that and put a screen wall there that works. And actually, at the sign for the Brown Jug, we've kind of opened that area up to provide a little more space for pedestrians to kind of camp there while they're waiting for the light to change, that kind of stuff. And then on the northeast corner, that's all North Rim Bank's property. We're actually pushing their existing sign. We're actually relocating that, or it will be relocated. So that maybe will demonstrate that we don't have that flexibility as a part of this project. Whether that property becomes available for in the future by land sale or something, I can't quite say, but it's parking for businesses. And similarly, House of Hobbies, same thing on the southeast corner, and then REI on the southwest corner.
Right, I couldn't imagine putting anything there, but I don't know, it seems that, with the land use planning revisions going on, that these would be two ideal areas to sort of bring them into the urban design fold and engage these private businesses in more of a, pedestrian civic kind of interaction. But, okay, I understand the reasoning. Thank you.
While we're there, is there a reason that you didn't improve the area in front of House of Hobby with landscape?
Yes, it's pretty tight there. Parking was a big issue, and taking of parking at these different businesses that historically had these very tight spots in front of their businesses, many of them often backing out onto Spenard to, just wasn't safe, and it was the old school way things were done. In the case of House of Hobbies, they did have enough space left to have some circulation and parking up there. They did not want to participate in improvements right up to the business front or anything like that. They wanted to maintain what they had for vehicle circulation for their clients.
Okay, thank you. Are you done, Mr. Condon? Sorry.
Yes, thank
Great.
you.
Thank you, Ms. Morse.
Thank you, Chair. I would also like to commend you. I think this work is amazing, and I am a high user of this Northeast Spenard area. Seeing the landscape plans, we don't always get a full set like this, and I have a much better idea of what you're trying to accomplish here. So I did just want to share my kudos to you and your team.
Thank you.
As far as questions go, I think most of them have been covered since I hit this button. So no questions.
Great, thank you, Ms. Morse. Mr. Miller.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we're looking at sheet L3, I had a question on the bike lanes and opting not to paint them, but to, I just want to make sure I understand this, extend them dashed through the intersection.
Yes, at signalized intersections, so that's going to be Benson, Northern Lights, and Fireweed. When the bike lane travels through in a situation where a driver would be making a right-hand turn, that bike lane will continue out into the intersection approximately 40 to 50 feet as a visual cue to the driver that a bike may be coming along. And at the unsignalized intersections, my understanding is all of them, the bike lane will dash through those in a dashed line. I guess this will all be in green as well. I'm going to turn around and see if I'm getting that right, Susan. Not really, maybe? Do you want to speak to that?
If you could state your name and spell it for the record, that'd be great. Thank you.
My name is Susan Atchison. Susan, S-U-S-A-N, Atchison, A-C-H-E-S-O-N. I'm with Lounsbury and Associates. The bike lanes, we are following the DOT recommendations for bike lanes throughout the corridor. MOA and DOT are working together so that the bike lanes are similar throughout the city. And we will, unsignalized intersections will have the outside lane striped. It's a 2-foot by 6-foot space dash stripe across the intersection to show the continuation of the bike lane across the intersection. The signalized intersections will have 50 feet of green roll-on paint from the crosswalk, 50 feet back from the crosswalk, so that it alerts the driver making the right that there is something going on there. We had limited right-of-way, so we could not put any kind of separation between there, but we do want to encourage the driver to pay attention.
Okay, thanks.
Just to clarify, if you could hang tight there. So this condition says consider coloring the bike lanes. It doesn't say striping. It says lanes.
The lane, we will. It'll be 50 feet of paint in the lane at the intersection.
50 feet of paint. Say that again?
It'll be 50 feet of roll-on paint in the bike lane. So it'll be colored. We'll have a white stripe, the green asphalt at the intersections.
Only, or throughout the whole corridor?
Only at the signalized intersections.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. Another question I had is in regards to the transit shelters. You had mentioned that it's one of the highest uses of transit in the city, and there's 10 or 9 transit stops, but you're not providing any shelters. I imagine they're for a couple of reasons, but
yeah, it's the inebriate situation. As you guys have all been in that area, that the transit stops, particularly in front of North Rim Bank, are a very popular hangout, and that's been a huge impact actually to that business. We worked with transit, Randy Burke, the transit department, on all of these stops, very carefully placed and collaborated on in terms of where they go and what they include. So the final decision, to be short about this, was not to include shelters. Now there is one bike storage shelter up by Bosco's, so this is just north of Fireweed in the northbound lane at a transit shelter. And MOA Transit got a grant where they could provide 2 of these, probably up to 2 of these, depending on how expensive they got. And because that area, the inebriate problem, thins out significantly up there, we wanted to at least include one of those shelters. This is for bike storage, mind you, not the transit stop itself. They're associated with it, but that's the only shelter on the project.
And did you get any public comments regarding those bus shelters? Or lack of?
We certainly had to explain this several times as why not. Sometimes they were there, sometimes they went away. As a landscape architect, I kind of wrestled with, designing for a management situation rather than our citizens and people that might actually be using these facilities. And that's a tough one, but ultimately public input was understood the intent, and the business owners in particular supported not having shelters. Okay, and then 10 years from now, the city dries up, there's space for shelters? There is space for shelters, yeah. The pads and everything for the transit stops are standard, so they have a lot of standard dimensions, and they will accommodate a shelter if the time comes when one can be put in. Okay, thanks. A couple more questions. This is on sheet ST8 and ST9. This is at Hillcrest Drive, right as it tops the hill between Hillcrest and 23rd. The bakery is there. I think it's Fran's Bakery. Yes. I've walked along that road before, or along that section, and
I've kind of been nudged out into the street by the trucks that park there. I'm just curious about a couple things. First off, that's going to be an 8-foot wide pathway right there?
Yes, there will be a pathway there. This was a very talked about section of the design for a long time. So going back a little bit, the project that constructed from Chester Creek up to Hillcrest has an 8-foot pathway on the west side. And then what happens? You know, you've got all these trucks and vans parked out there that back over the sidewalk, and potentially a dangerous situation for people on bikes or walking. So the idea there is there's going to be angled parking in front of the bakery.
You mean for the bakery trucks?
For the bakery trucks.
Okay.
There is an approach. I'm looking at ST9, and right where it says D26, that's where you would go in, and then that parking would be angled, so that this is sort of a one-way situation where you'd go in at D26 and go south, and there'll be angled parking along the east face of that building. And then if we go to, I guess, up to ST8, where it says D23, that's where you would come out of that angled parking area. And between those two approaches, what we're doing is providing a vertical curb with flexible bollards on top of it. The intention is that those bollards are placed where the leading edge of a bumper backing out of those angled parking spaces would initially start to cross over the top of that vertical curb. And so if you were backing, you would bump into that flexible bollard and understand that you couldn't go any further. And then on the east side of that vertical curb, we're actually coloring the concrete, sort of a colored band of concrete 2 feet wide against that vertical curb. So pedestrians and cyclists will be visually cued that there's sort of a situation there, and they'll tend to, we think, shy away kind of towards the east of the side of the sidewalk.
Okay, so you're talking about what looks like a retaining wall?
Yes.
Okay, on the inside of the path.
Yeah, and
okay.
If you have a sec, I think I have a graphic.
L7 shows the parking stalls and calls out the curb and the flexible bollards, stamped concrete.
Okay. That makes sense. Do you guys get the idea of the flexible bollards and everything?
Yeah.
I had a couple questions about that, and let's stick with the turning movements first. So does that meet code right now? So those are the standard 9x20 parking stall with a...
The angled parking?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And then, describe these flexible bollards.
It's a product, and essentially the base of them is sort of spring-loaded.
Okay.
There's actually a detail.
I saw the detail, but I didn't see anything that called out like anything other than a curved bollard that shows it.
It's on L13, 2 of L13, and that essentially is a section graphic of how that would work.
So what's the material of the bollard?
I've not seen one in person, but I think they're plastic. They're not a metal bollard. They're a HDPE type of material.
So there's some flex joint at the bottom.
Exactly.
And a spring inside of it.
Yep.
Just goes.
So you bolt them down in the pour, either put anchor bolts and bolt it down, or sink them in.
Cool.
First time will have used them, but
Yeah.
we thought a lot about this.
Did you think about the location of those? It looks like they're all aligned with if you extend the parking stall down, or the
Well,
parking stripe.
the intention was that they were more or less directly aligned with, as I was saying, the leading. So if you were backing, your left-hand rear end of your vehicle would be the first thing that would start approaching that wall. You're backing out to go south, and the intention of the location of those flexible bollards is that rear left corner of your vehicle would tap that. So
Gotcha.
you don't
Yeah.
get you don't get half of a rear end of your car over that before you feel something or
Right.
hear something.
Okay. And the next question is, in this parking area, I know there's a condition to the resolve, but there is a section in the code that talks about having a separation of 4 feet between the building and the parking, and it looks like some of these spaces have, some of them don't. I presume that you're going to resolve that, and it's not going to be an issue. There's no dimensions on here, but
Right. I'm looking back to my teammates. It's been a little while.
that's all right. It's a condition to resolve, right?
It's,
Is it a consider? I forgot.
well, we'll certainly look at it. I guess what I'd say is that there's a lot of work in there in a very strange situation where you've got a very interesting use that conflicts with the area, honestly. And with the space we had available, we think we've achieved a good design,
Yeah.
all things considered.
Okay. Cool. Go ahead, Mr. Miller. Thank you for letting me interject there.
Sure. Yeah, just one last question, and this was the one I asked about staff to the notion of the rectangular rapid flashing beacon at 27th Avenue. I keep on going back to that because, being familiar with that intersection, it's very busy. Bear's Tooth is right there, so you got a lot of people coming out. I guess I'm wondering if, I'm going to pull that back because that's just setting you up. So I'll wait on that one. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Morse.
Thank you, Chair. One thing we haven't covered, well, first a quick question about the bike lanes. I think Susan, is that correct? It might be, it's one of those lingering. Susan, the bike painting, we talked about 50 feet, the whole width, right? So the 5 feet of bike lane is painted green or blue. How often are the pictograms of the bicycles painted in the lanes?
They are at the start of the bike lanes, and then I honestly cannot remember at this time how often they are,
And
but
then,
they are dictated by MUTCD and traffic.
and then the unsignalized lanes, you're saying that's not a full paint, it's just the outside lane. The lane closest to the drive lane is a dashed line, is that
Just the
correct?
striping, yes.
Okay. I don't see any issue with that. Then, thank you. The other question I had was on recommendation number 2 from the staff on the site distance triangles. Now, knowing Spenard pretty well, those markers of place that you were showing on one of your presentations earlier there's only one right now that I know of at Hillcrest and Spenard.
The wayfinding columns? Yes. We moved those out of the site distance triangles. We actually had a little situation when we first turned this in. We then put site distance triangles in the plans and found that we had all kinds of things in them. So we gave Ms. Ferguson a new set of landscape plans that showed all that stuff adjusted. We have 2 wayfinding columns in the project. One is located at the northeast corner of 27th Avenue, and that one did have to back away from the street a little bit. And then the next one is at Photo Avenue parking lot, and that is also out of the site distance triangle. There were quite a few features. The business signage at Spenard Center all had to shift around a little bit, as did a lot of plants and things like that.
Okay. And then the 2 parking lots at the north end of the project, one at 23rd and the one on Spenard between 23rd and Hillcrest Drive, are those lighted? Lit?
Yeah, I think they are lit, yes.
I didn't see the lighting.
L9 and L10
Thank you.
show the light symbols on there.
Yes,
Street lighting and-
thank you,
Yep.
Chairman.
I was looking on the wrong plans. I didn't see the blowups. Thank you. And then the last one on question 2 was the overhang. That wasn't very, the recommendation wasn't very specific, the one I read.
So that refers to angled parking, and if it's an 18 or 20-foot stall.
Is
And
that north parking area by the
I
bakery?
have a feeling that there's numerous locations that
Okay.
scenario could come up.
Is that being resolved per staff recommendation?
Yes, part of my initial description, I kind of took that to be pretty specific to Coots.
Oh,
So here's the project, a little zoomed in at Coots. In your packet, there's sort of a zigzag kind of effect there. That was a response to parts of the design that went away. So when those went away, which were planters at the main entry of Coots, we decided based on that fact and comments about snow clearing, with the zigzag thing, might catch the leading edge of those curbs with a plow. We simplified this.
Mm-hmm.
So it just comes straight across now. And that also expanded this lane width, backing out to 16 feet, where Title 21 allows 12 feet actually for a one-way 45-degree parking scenario.
great. Thank you, Ms. Morse. Ms. Sullivan.
Okay, I have two simple questions, and maybe they're related. The fact that I'm not a civil engineer. Can you explain sheet is ST6 has like a crosswalk that it zigzags? Why it's that zigzag? I mean, I'm sure there's a reason, but I just couldn't understand.
The crosswalk.
Yeah.
Yes, it's, I probably won't say this very eloquently, but it's kind of a pedestrian safety thing. Now, there's two situations where this happens, here and at 27th, where we have crosswalks like this. And the idea is that they go out and they have kind of a decision point in the middle. So they have a refuge out there, and then they can kind of realign and then take the rest of the way across. On each side of those, at the back of curb, where those accessible aprons are leading to the crosswalk, we actually have lit bollards. So while we don't have the flashing light, we are trying to call attention to these areas with lit bollards in those locations of two different heights. So there's a shorter one and a taller one, two of each. It's meant to light maybe children and adults, and maybe somebody sitting on a bike.
Okay, thank you. And then the second one, I think it's a safety concern that I have. And it's in sheet S11. And you have the Spinar Road and the corner with Photo Avenue.
Yes.
And then seems like this is a new parking layout, and you have the 12-foot aisle for backing for safety, which I think that's great. But then I find out that the first ADA style will back into the corner with no aisle, 12-foot aisle. So I feel that it's a little unsafe. Again, I'm not a civil engineer. I don't know if it's code compliant.
Can you say where you're talking about again?
It's sheet S11.
And do you by chance have like another reference on
I mean,
there?
you can find it
think
page
if you look at-
9 of the staff report.
Yeah, or if you look at L8, there's a landscape
Oh, yeah.
sheet that kind of shows it a little more completely.
Okay.
So your question is it safe for the accessible parking to back out into Photo Ave?
Yes, like I feel that it should be an area of relief, so they have the 12-foot backing space also. And it seems like they are the ADA and they're right at the corner.
So they're pressed against that
Yes.
face of that curb. Susan, I don't know if you have a...
We've worked on this property with traffic, and what happens is the 12-foot area gives them a space to back up so that they can see around the cars that are parked there and see if they can back up into this road and then go off.
Yes, I understand that, but the problem is that the ADA style doesn't have that space.
Well, it does in that they can go back, straight back.
I think there's another.
And then
Okay,
make a
so-
decision about whether they can pull out and get out.
So to interject.
Yeah, go ahead.
The end of Photo Avenue is closed off, so there's no incoming traffic on that side of the road. So
From
when
the
that
east?
person is backing up, they're not backing
Actually,
up.
we are reopening
Are
photo
you?
with this project because we're putting the median across the road. But
So, Ms. Sullivan, is your concern that they're not able to see the cars turning eastbound on Photo Avenue, or that they won't stop, or that they?
Well, I just think that, so you're saying that the 12-foot aisle is for them to back straight, not to back parallel?
yeah, they could back up straight, and then that way they can see around the cars that are parked there, and it gives them better line of sight to make the decision about if they can back up into the road to make their maneuver and get out onto the road,
So
onto Photo.
So the ADA style, if they're backing out, okay, I guess they have no cars next to, so they will have clear vision.
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question for Ms. Atkinson, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to make you keep coming up. The question I have is that recently the commission heard a case. It was a DOT case that was before them one night, and it was similar. We were talking about the need to paint, through the intersections for the bike lanes to signal to the driver. And they raised objection to doing that because they questioned the durability of the roll-on paint, or we didn't actually even talk about how the paint would be applied, but you're saying tonight it's going to be a roll-on paint product. So my question is, do you know anything about the durability in relationship to studded tires or plowing? And if so, what might the maintenance requirements be? And then the second part of my question is, do you know of any examples of painted bike lanes in winter cities?
We do not. This is a test project.
Okay.
And that's what we're going to determine is how this holds up at these intersections during these conditions.
Okay, good. Thank you.
So could you, just curious, what goes through my mind when this painting is applied is just like the stripes or, the big crosswalks, how they actually grind off a half-inch or so and then infill it with glass and everything, and then it's reflective. Is that a similar process, or is it actually on the surface of the asphalt?
If I understand it correctly, it's actually on the surface of the asphalt so that you still get the asphalt, the bumps and all the aggregate will still help.
Yeah, cool, great, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? No? Okay, I have a couple here. I would duplicate the comments on the packet. It's very well put together and easy to read, and good work.
Thanks.
It's nicely done. There was some discussion about the homeowners, business owners. Just curious, what if they, like most of them, have been along the project for the last 10 years, or if you guys have experienced a lot of turnover and that was advantageous or not?
I wouldn't say there's been a lot of turnover. Once the project came back to life in this last year, actually it seems like it's been a little less than a year, I think the business owners realized that it was going to happen, and that if they wanted to have the improvements come up to the front of their business, then it was time to talk about those and see what worked best for everybody. And I'm real proud of the business owners because it was a very interesting process. We met with them 2 to 3 times each, probably meet with a couple more, even more times. Overall, it was a very high participation, but there were a few businesses that chose not to.
Okay, great, thanks. I have a couple here. So there's some description in your narrative that talked about, let's just rephrase it here. What areas of the project are still contingent on adjacent property owners' approval and right-of-way acquisition? Is that still an issue?
The right-of-way acquisition is moving forward. Many of the, I don't have an exact number of how many have, been taken care of. It's a complex process from my observation of it, what's happening, and I would say it's successfully moving forward.
So what we're seeing here before us is basically what has already been acquired.
For the most part, we're needing to advance the design. So once we have an indication that the property owner is willing to participate, we're designing and having meetings with them. There's a right-of-way acquisition expert, Traver Land Services, I believe is the correct name of the firm, and they are negotiating all of that stuff.
Okay, so for the most part, what we're seeing here is what's been acquired or going to be, and it's pretty much going to move forward. Okay, that was just some questions there I still had. I do appreciate this whole notion of on a bigger level. If you talk about Spenard Road from International all the way to Hillcrest, there's a vast difference in the right-of-way cross-section. And if you go from International to, say, Minnesota, a little bit before Minnesota where the railroad tracks are.
Exactly.
It's a beautiful cross-section. I mean, you have separation of trail, you have a lawn area, and you have continuous trees, repetition. And this section of the road, it's really hard to accomplish that. And I think that's what makes strong designs, strong road designs, is that continuation. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any opportunity here to do that, or else you guys would have already tried to.
We don't have the room to do the separated pathways for sure because of the narrow right-of-way. I would say that we actually got more than I expected, especially with the bike lanes in the road. So I feel like we've done the very best possible.
Yeah,
and
I would agree.
at a late time to get the bike lane, make them official bike lane widths, there was a big decision made to get a little bit more right away so we could get that to work.
Okay, great, that's good. I do appreciate the matching of the elements. The speed limit, there was discussion about reducing the speed limit, and that or a comment, I think, to reduce the speed limit, and the response was that we were just not going to. So I was curious why, the thought process behind that. Maybe I missed part of
The speed limit's not going to be reduced at this time. A speed study was done on this corridor, and it is the 85th percentile is currently 30. People are going 35 miles an hour down the road currently. So traffic made the decision to keep it 35 miles an hour, but they are going to repeat the speed study once this road is in place. They'd like to see how it functions first before making a determination to change the speed limit, because it's a minor arterial road, and there are certain speed limits that are associated with that classification of road, and so they would need documentation to change it.
Yep. Okay, very good. Thank you. That was all that I had. Anybody else? Nope. Seeing and hearing none. Okay, thank you. So now we have before us case number 0124, context-sensitive solutions transportation project site plan review for Bernard Road, construction phase 2, Hillcrest Drive to Benson Boulevard. Can I get a motion for approval? Thank you, Mr. Conan. Can we get a second? Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Mr. Conan, can you speak to your motion, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move to approve case 2016-0124.
Thank you. Did you want to include the staff recommendations in your motion?
Are you asking me to speak to my motion?
You have to state the motion first, and that's usually included when you state the motion. Yeah, so,
okay, so I move to approve case 2016-0124, context-sensitive solutions, transportation project plans in hand review, Spenard Road reconstruction, phase 2, Hillcrest Drive to Benson Boulevard.
with conditions as outlined by staff, or?
With
Not.
conditions 1, 3, and 4.
Okay, and we can always remove them. Okay, and you have a second? So, Ms. Sullivan?
Oh, wait.
Yep.
With conditions 1, 2, and 4. Sorry.
Okay, so.
1, 2, and 4.
Okay. Would you like to speak to your motion?
Yes. I think this is a very good improvement to the municipality. I believe that the petitioner has adhered to the code requirements of Title 21 as closely as possible, given the nuances of the area. I think this is a vast improvement in that section of road, and I hope in the future that the upgrades continue down Spenard.
Great, thank you. Ms. Sullivan, would you like to speak to your second?
I concur with Commissioner Joel, and I think they did a great job with community involvement, landscaping, bike racks. It's super complete, the project. We are very excited to see the project coming through.
Thank you, and if people are thinking about findings of facts too, that would be good to chime in on those. Mr. Miller, you're up.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if this is where we get to discuss the motion.
Yep. And you can state your opinions, and if you
Well,
want
okay,
to make
thanks.
a motion to amend.
Not yet. I would like to get some of the other commissioners' thoughts on the crosswalk at 27th and whether that should include a flashing, let's see, what would it be, rectangular rapid flashing beacon. It seems to me that that's a fairly high-risk intersection for pedestrians. I don't quite see the need to have a study to determine whether it's needed. But I also wanted to hear other people's thoughts on that, to see if they had some of the same concerns.
Sure. Other commissioners, what do you think?
I was comfortable with the process as described, so I was going to let that one go
Okay.
personally.
Thank you, Mr. Condon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I agree with Commissioner Morse that these kinds of flashing beacons should only be deployed in sort of extreme conditions, and I don't think that threshold has been crossed in this location based on studies that have been done for the number of people using that area.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Condon. Anybody else?
Well, it was recommended in the Pedestrian Safety Improvements Concept Report, just to point that out.
So it was a comment by the non-motorized transportation coordinator to include RRFB. And there was discussion that I believe a study could be warranted, or it was kind of one of those things that sounded like it was just going to happen. Ms. Ferguson, could you chime in a little bit?
Yes, I would caution the commission against making that a requirement. There is a precise engineering process that they go through to determine whether or not it is warranted. And as I said, I would leave that to the engineers to decide if it's needed.
Thank you, Ms. Ferguson. I will chime in at the last. I am on the same page as Mr. Condon and Ms. Morse. I don't think it's necessary as a condition. I think that it'll happen through the project, and if it happens, they will determine it at a later date.
Okay, fair enough. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Ms. Morse?
Is it finding of facts time yet?
Sorry, what's that?
Can I do my finding of facts?
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
Ready? Okay.
Ready?
So some of my finding of facts tonight include in approval of this case are this presentation is a great example of how we need our new projects to work with the new Title 21 and 23 Muni codes and the existing conditions. I think the amount of landscaping you fit in that right-of-way was phenomenal, and I think our landscape designers and architects on this board are pretty impressed at what you could accomplish in such a tight place. I find that this design is aligned with the Anchorage pedestrian plan and the 2020 plan. And I guess that's it for me.
Great, thank you. I will bring up the topic of condition number 3 that was intentionally omitted. I'm in support of that condition. I think that it's a great opportunity right now to include it in the project. Mr. Condon? No.
Yes. What?
Did you? I'm seeing things on my screen here. Ms. Morris?
I have a security issue with that fence, in a personal opinion. I know it's a pretty see-through fence, so we either do a privacy fence and then you create a security issue, or you have a see-through fence and then you're just layering.
I'm sorry, I misspoke. I misspoke.
Not the
I
decorative
retract
fence?
that statement.
Okay.
I misspoke. So number 3 is still off the table, and yeah, I don't have anything else on that one.
Okay.
That's correct. I am not in support of 3. I agree with the motion as stated and the conditions as stated. Okay, so I'll add a couple other things. I do think the design team, since nobody else is commenting, everybody's done, I'll chime in. I think the design team did an excellent job on meshing the elements of the overall Spenard Road plan all the way from taking elements from the international side and also the Hillcrest side that goes down into Westchester Lagoon. I think that the implementation of the site lighting, the bollards, the flexible bollards, the placement of vegetation is an extremely tight corridor, and the locations that the vegetation is placed, I think, is good and will add to the attractiveness of the site. I mean, of the corridor, and it will help the area immensely. I think the pedestrian amenities that the sidewalks and pathways are going to be a great add to the corridor as well, and the bike lanes I think are going to be used heavily. Based on that, I support the motion, and without further ado, we'll vote. Thank you, everyone. The motion passes. And we go on to the next one. Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight and chatting and presenting. Ms. Morris.
I asked to be excused for personal reasons.
Sure, you need to leave the meeting. Is that what you're asking? Sure. It's the first time that's ever happened to me, but yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Sawhill is back in the room. So we're going on to case number... So just the time is 8:53 that Ms. Morris is leaving and Mr. Sawhill got back in. All right, thank you. Okay, so the next item on the agenda are public hearings. Case number 2016-0132. We have a report from staff. Oh, sorry, no, wait, I need to read the process real quick here, right? No? Okay, before the public hearing. Okay, so the procedures by which the public may speak to the Urban Design Commission at this meeting is: 1, after the staff presentation is completed on public hearing items, the chair will ask for the public testimony on the issues. Persons who wish to testify will follow the time limits established in the Urban Design Commission rules of procedures. 2A, petitioners, including all of his/her representatives, are 10 minutes. Rebuttal by the petitioner may be allowed when time has been reserved. 2B, representatives of groups, community council, PTAs, etc., 5 minutes, and 2C, individuals are 3 minutes. When your testimony is complete, you may be asked to ask questions by the commission. You may only testify once on any issue unless questioned by the commission. And number 4, an individual may have appeal rights related to any action the Urban Design Commission takes, except commission recommendations to the assembly which are not appealable. Appeals must be filed with the clerk's office within 20 days after approval by the Urban Design Commission of the resolution, which is the commission's final decision. A fee for the appeal is required at the time of filing. Ms. Ferguson, you have your report, please?
Yes, this is a variance from AMC 2107-080H3A1 to allow a fence for the partial length of primary front yard setback on Huckleberry Street to exceed a height of 4 feet in front yard setbacks. Under the approval, excuse me, under the approval criteria, A, the proposed alternative achieves the intent of the subject design standard to the same or better degree than the subject standard. The standard is not applicable. For criteria B, the standard is met under the Anchorage Bold 2020 plan, policy number 5. The fence appears to be compatible in scale with surrounding properties. Likewise, under the West Anchorage District Plan, under Neighborhood Objectives 1, the requested height variance does not appear to conflict with the preservation of neighborhood character, as there are 2 nearby homes with fences that exceed 4 feet, and no comments have been received from neighbors in opposition to the variance request. Criteria C, the standard is partially met. The fence constructed in 2014 replaced a chain link fence on 80th Avenue and a split rail fence on Huckleberry Street. While Ms. McVeigh notes that the fence improves the appearance of the neighborhood, a fence that meets code requirements of 4 feet would have achieved the same objective. Criteria D, the standard is met. There is no indication that the fence has adversely affected adjacent property owners. No comments have been received from adjacent property owners objecting to the variance request. 1 comment was received in support of the variance. And also I want to add that yesterday a neighbor called me who had received one of the public hearing notices and said that they didn't have any objection to the fence. Their only concern was there is a fire hydrant right at the corner. You can see it in some of the photographs, right at the corner of 80th Avenue and Huckleberry Street. And the fence is only about 3 feet away from that fire hydrant. And their only concern was as long as there's access is maintained to that fire hydrant, then they had no objection to it. And I asked him why he didn't just write his comment in and, send it in. And he said he doesn't have mail delivery in terms of picking it up and getting it here into the planning department because he has a P.O. box instead. And he said he doesn't have a car at the moment, so he thought he would call and convey his comments to me. And just for the record, his name is Alan Fuller, and he lives at 3503 West 80th Avenue. Going on, criteria E, the standard is partially met. The requested variance will not change the character of the R1 zoning district. The intent of the code is to limit the height of fences in small lot residential zones, such as the R1 zoning district, to 4 feet under most circumstances. The petitioner transitioned the height of the primary front yard fence from 4 to 6 feet, making it a better fit in maintaining the character of the neighborhood and intent of the code. However, the fence in the secondary front yard setback is not completely within the intent of the code, as headlights from in-street traffic do not appear to impact the residents, and there's a gate in the fence that allows direct vehicular access to the street. Criteria F, this standard is not applicable. Criteria G, the standard is met. The fence is outside the site distance triangle. And criteria H, this standard is also not applicable. The department finds that all the standards are either substantially met or are not applicable, and therefore recommends approval of the variance. If after the public hearing the commission finds all 8 standards of approval are met, then the approval should be subject to the following condition number 1 on page 5. I also want to add that I have an email from the fire department. They did in fact go out and check that fire hydrant there, and they said that they think it's okay as long as the area around the hydrant is kept free of snow, ice, and vegetation. That's all I have.
Great, thank you, Ms. Ferguson. Do we have any questions for Ms. Ferguson? Mr. Sawhill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to confirm that the secondary front yard is 10 feet wide. Is that correct?
I'll have to look.
You talking about the setback or the distance between the fence and the property line?
Well, we have a fence in the secondary front yard, in the primary front yard and in the secondary front yard. The
Correct.
primary front yard is 20 feet, and I believe the secondary front yard on a corner lot is 10 feet.
So you're talking about the setback
Yeah.
for the
So you're talking about the setback of
building setback on
the
the
building
double front.
setback? Yeah, because I'm looking at the as-built, and it has, if I'm looking at the right one, it has a 10-foot easement, and they show the line there, and the building is outside that.
Right, but the fence is in it.
Yeah.
And so a conforming alternative for the fence on 80th Avenue would be 10 feet back from the property line, which would put it outside the secondary front yard setback.
Right. I think on one of these drawings, it's like starts in it and then it kind of gradually goes outside it. I'll try and find the drawing that shows that.
And then the other conforming alternative for the front yard setback encroachment would be reducing the height to 4 feet for the entire length, correct?
That is the
Yeah.
option. That's another option.
Yeah, but I think it's important to point out, Ms. Ferguson, that what's before us is just on 80th, right? We're not talking about the secondary.
No, we're talking about both.
We're talking about both?
Yes, the primary
That's good to clarify.
primary setback and then the secondary. Yep.
So it's in both then?
Yes, exactly.
Roger. Okay.
And the as-built shows it along 80th Avenue. You can see the fence along that line, and then it comes a little bit within it.
Okay.
So, yeah, it's the issue is that it's 6 foot there.
So it is both in, so the front yard, primary is 10.
And the secondary, it's encroaching on both.
Yeah, the other way. Primary is 20, secondary is 10. It's encroaching on both.
All right, thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, if the petitioner's here, we can hear your presentation. If you could state your name and spell your last name for the record, that'd be great.
Hello, my name is Adrienne McVeigh, A-D-R-I-E-N-N-E, M-C-V as in Victor, E-Y. Thank you, Ms. Ferguson, and thank you to the commission for hearing the case. So the fence was installed in July 2014 following damage to the existing chain link fence in the secondary front setback along 80th Avenue, which was a 5-foot chain link fence with a gate at the property line. The front yard at that time had a 4-foot split rail fence also at the property line, and the new fence was installed along that same line as the existing fence. You may note on the as-built that the fence is slightly in places outside of the property line. I did work with the right-of-way department to obtain an encroachment permit for that. Let's see. So as far as the reason that I'm asking for this, I was unaware at the time that the fence was constructed that the fence along 80th Avenue, which is the secondary front setback, was a front setback at all. I thought that it was a backyard, so I didn't know that at the time. As far as why I wanted the higher fence there, there's quite a bit of foot traffic. There is actually on both corners. There's a bus stop along Huckleberry is the Sand Lake Elementary bus stop directly in front of my property. So there's on a daily basis during the school year, children waiting for the bus, and then of course in the winter, quite a few parents will park in front of the house waiting to drop off and pick up their children. There's also a church directly across the street where they park buses directly across from my house. There's also a daycare playground in the parking lot there. You can see in my submission there sort of a map of what I'm talking about there. So that's discussing the partial 6-foot fence in the primary front setback. As far as the secondary front setback along 80th there, which is the one that I wasn't aware was a front setback whenever I installed the fence. Also, a Mears Middle School bus stop along 80th Avenue, significant foot traffic due to the bus stop and the church across the street from me. I also have dogs. Whenever I had the 5-foot chain link fence, I observed kids stopping alongside the fence to antagonize the dogs. At one point, it actually included poking with sticks. So, as Ms. Ferguson mentioned, there is vehicular access along the 80th Street fence. That is for RV parking. So, used probably, I don't know, probably between 10 and 15 times a year. So that's the story there. As Ms. Ferguson mentioned, there are two adjacent properties that have 6-foot fences in their front setbacks. So I don't believe that the 6-foot fence in the secondary front setback is a detriment in that respect or breaks from the prevailing appearance of the neighborhood. I do believe, you can see the pictures in my submission, I do believe that the fence, along with other improvements that we've made on the property since I purchased it, have improved the appearance of the neighborhood. Gotten lots of compliments from neighbors, in fact, as well as there was a positive comment submitted, as Mr. Ferguson mentioned, I believe, in support of granting the variance. And yeah, I think that is about all I have to say, and I can answer any questions you may have.
Great, thank you. You have 5 minutes and 26 seconds for rebuttal. Questions? Mr. Sahil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So to make this fence conforming, I see a couple options, and I want to explore those with you. So the fence in the front yard could be 4 feet tall for the entire length, and then it would be conforming. And so why is that a bad thing, or why should we approve the variance for that portion?
That portion is mainly due to the bus that stops right there in front of my house, and morning and afternoon. Sand Lake Elementary has a bus stop right there. So it's a privacy thing. The reason that I wanted to tear it up near the corner there, so it's basically along the front of the house, the fence is 4 feet tall, and then it's tiered up near the edge of the house to the 6 foot tall, just so that right at the corner there, it's the full 6 foot length for additional privacy. With a 4 foot fence there, the kids waiting at the bus stop could easily look in. It's a daylight basement home and see inside there. So that was the reason for having the fence at a taller height near the corner.
Okay, and then along 80th, there's really 2 choices to be conforming there. Again, the whole thing could be 4 feet high in its current location, or you could move it back 10 feet and keep it 6 feet high. So why aren't those alternatives okay?
Well, it would reduce the size of the backyard significantly. As far as the 4-foot question, the big driver there is for privacy purposes. There is, as I mentioned, between the 2 bus stops and the church, which is directly across from Huckleberry Street, there's quite a lot of foot traffic. The previous fence, in fact, which had been installed since at least 1992, according to the old as-built, which isn't included. You guys have the new one that I just had completed here a few months back. So the previous fence was a 5-foot chain link fence, which I guess hadn't presented an issue, but as far as code goes. But I did have kids stopping in the right-of-way along my house, and at one point poking dogs with sticks, and more frequently than that, running up and down the fence, making noise, rattling the fence, stopping to squat down and antagonize the dogs. So it's more of a matter there of privacy and preventing those issues from occurring.
My other concern when tall fences are close to the road is it creates kind of a tunnel effect. And so the air, light, and open feel of fences that are set back or shorter are kind of lost. And so it's a kind of a visual impact to the neighborhood when we have tight fences. How do you feel this affects the visual impact of the neighborhood?
I think and would hope you would agree to look at the pictures of the old fence as well as the new fence. I do see what you're saying, but in my personal opinion, the effect is the visual effect is an overwhelmingly positive one. I don't know, Ms. Ferguson did mention that the site distance triangle is preserved. I did have the same surveyor who completed the new updated as-built also came out to measure that and confirm that the site distance triangle was preserved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sahil. Anybody else? Mr. Condon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you live on a very busy corner. You've got the school bus to Sand Lake. You've got the school bus to Mears. You've got a church. You've got, what else is happening right nearby?
Yeah, so the church also, let's see, I think I included it on one of the maps in my submission there. The church also has recently started parking buses along in their parking lot, but right next to my house on the Huckleberry Street side there. And they've also opened a daycare. So in addition to kids going in and out and parents bringing kids in and out to the actual church building itself, there's also recently been a playground put into the parking lot immediately across from the front of my house. So there is, quite a bit. The two bus stops, one on each corner, and then a church with a outdoor playground and daycare immediately across the street, across Huckleberry.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Condon. Anybody else? Ms. Ferguson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make a modification to the request. I understand now the chair's kind of confusion, and I'll just reread the request. It's a variance from AMC 2107-080H3A1 and 3 to allow a fence setback on Huckleberry Street to exceed a height of 4 feet in front yard setback, and to allow a 6-foot fence in the secondary front yard setback.
Okay. Thank you. I have a couple of questions. So I do sympathize with you with the privacy. I understand that completely. There's certainly a difference between these two pictures on case packet page 28 and 29. I don't think there's any real question as to the appearance of the fence. Like, it's well constructed, it has a nice stain on it. I think the bigger question is, how does that affect the neighborhood? Like, when somebody sees a brand new fence go in, they say, oh yeah, that's a nice fence, right? It's got some nice stain on it, you know, it looks good. We've had a couple of presentations in here regarding security, and in particular at parks. And the takeaway from that was to have visibility in. So what you're proposing here is limiting visibility out. And I understand that from a perspective of privacy coming in, but I also see a concern from residents on the outside having areas for people to hide at corners and such, and you know, having kids at your bus stop, you know, that can be, any fence can be antagonizing for a dog. You know, I could see him taking a stick and running up against the wood fence and having the same problem. So, but I do see both sides of that, and it's kind of a tough one for me because personally I kind of like the old one. You know, I like the seeing in and seeing the open space, you know, and I like the transparent fence. It kind of opens things up, but at the same time, I could see how you would want somebody to not see in, and if you have a problem on the corner, how that could mitigate, you know, a couple of issues. But I'm just curious if there's other ways that those issues could be resolved. Maybe talking to the kids, or, I mean, if the kids' parents are there, if you can chat with them. Have you explored any of those options?
I haven't. I would like to point out, of course, there was a request for public comment, and not only were there no negative responses received by neighbors, but there was actually a positive response received. So in terms of neighbors being leery of any security risks, in terms of providing a place for someone to hide within the fence, that did not seem to be a concern for the neighbors. So I guess that would be my response there.
Okay, great, thank you. Let's see here. The previous fence from 1992 was a chain link that was 5 feet tall. Is that correct?
Yes, and it had also had a gate on it, which allowed vehicular access.
Right. Yep. Okay. And you thought about the 4-foot height out front on was it 80th?
Out the primary front setback is along Huckleberry. So yes, on that one, as I mentioned, that's 4 foot along the front of the house, and at the corner of the house, it tiers up to the 6 foot.
Yep, it's on the plat here. So it looks like also at the where it tiers up is right at the vegetation, some spruce trees, existing vegetation there. So when you put in that 4 foot, the thought behind that was to block the views of the kids standing at the corner, because you could have carried that, right, 4 feet to the corner and then maintained 6 feet on the other portion. I'm just curious the thought process there on.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Yes. Yep.
Okay. Very good. That's all I have. Thank you. Ms. Sullivan.
I just want to comment.
Sure.
Imagine that we go and let everyone that has dogs build their fences 6 foot high. I mean, just seems that that's not a good reason for having a fence that it's 6 foot. But I concur that the neighbors have 6 foot high fences, and it would not change the aspect of the neighborhood. So I just wanted to comment that.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you have 5 minutes, 26 seconds for rebuttal, which is basically you can speak to any of the topics that we brought up, or Oh, I'm sorry, wait a minute, we have an open public testimony.
Oh, sure thing.
That's why it's a public hearing. So, thank you, and so now if there's anybody here wishing to testify, come on down and Ms. McVeigh, if you could stand off to the side real quick, there's somebody that would like to testify here. And if you could state your name for the record and spell your last name, appreciate it, thank you.
My name is Cinnamon Allsworth, A-L-S, as in Sierra, W-O-R-T-H, as in hotel. And we're neighbors with them, with Adrian and Brianna, but I don't know them. We just walk along their neighborhood quite often, and seems like it's a nice fence, and it fits in with the rest of the neighborhood, really.
Okay.
And I don't know. We get a lot of noise from the church as well. I can understand why that fence might help them in their neighborhood. That's all.
Great, okay. Does anybody have any questions? Nope. Thank you for coming out tonight. Appreciate it. Anybody else like to speak tonight? Hearing and seeing nobody walking down. Now, Ms. McVeigh, you have 5 minutes and 26 seconds for a rebuttal.
All right. I don't know that it's much of a rebuttal. I guess just a couple more comments. I did have the RV before I installed the new fence parked in the front driveway. We did have an occasion of vandalism where it was broken into and someone used the RV bathroom. I won't go into details. I don't really need to discuss that anymore. But yeah, the element of being able to have the RV within the fence, I believe, is a definite security benefit. And I don't think that I have much else to say other than just to reemphasize. I do believe it is within keeping with the existing character of the neighborhood, and a nice looking fence. And it seems that neighbors would agree, and I do believe that it's a little bit of an extenuating circumstance between the two bus stops, one on each corner, and also the church with the playground and the parking lot immediately across from Huckleberry. So I think that's all I have.
Great, thank you. We have a question from Mr. Condon.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick question. This is not just a visual issue. This is also an auditory issue. You've got sound, trespass from the church and all the activities.
Yeah, and actually I'm glad you mentioned that. So as I mentioned, the church has started, parking the buses immediately across from my house at Huckleberry. And every Sunday morning, those fire up. I think they go and pick up people to bring them to the church, and that in particular is an auditory issue. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
So
thank you.
If I could interject, and if you could expand on that a little bit more. So I'm on the page 40 of the staff packet. Huckleberry is on the left-hand side, which is west, and that portion of the fence is only 4 feet tall. So it sounded like the concept that was just brought up was that there's noise coming from the west, and that a 6-foot-high fence would somehow, somewhat, block that. Was that what was just described?
Yes, and I mean, as you point out, most of that fence is 4 feet. That was because the person who installed the fence was aware of that aspect of the code. So as much as it would have been nice to have a taller fence for the entirety of the primary front setback in order to block sound, that kind of like did the best that I thought that I could in tearing it up at the corner of the house to the corner of Huckleberry and 80th.
Okay, so you had a conversation, so that must have been before the fence was put in. You have a conversation with the fence guy, fence installer, and he was mentioning that there's a limitation of height, the 4-foot height, and the conversation ended with, okay, yeah, we'll go to this point and then go taller.
Right, he thought that would be okay.
Okay.
And at that time, I myself, I've gotten to learn quite a bit about municipal code since this occurred, but at that time I was not familiar.
Yeah, gotcha.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
And another, you brought up security with the RV. So when the RV was broken into, what fence was in there? You had a fence, you had the RV parked in a fence, correct?
Oh, no. The RV was broken into when it was parked in my front driveway prior to installing, prior to installing the new fence with the gate. So the RV was broken into, and the fence and pre new fence, the RV was just parked in the front driveway at the time, which is why I'm explaining why I really like being able to park the RV within the fence, because since that time there has not been any recurrences of vandalism.
And you've, the fence was in there in '92, and there was your RV was parked in there with the 5-foot high fence with the chain link. It was never parked.
I didn't park the RV in the chain link fence. No.
Oh, you did not.
No.
Oh, okay, but
No.
the gate was there, and
The gate was there.
Okay,
Yep.
gotcha.
Yep.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any more questions, and it looks like now the case rests with the board. What is the wish of the commission? Oh, I'm sorry. I have to close the public hearing.
Oh, okay.
Now the public hearing is closed.
Thanks.
And now the case rests with the commission. Get a motion for approval for case number 2016-0132. Thank you, Mr. Condon. Second by Mr. Winchester. Mr. Condon, would you state your motion, please?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move to approve case 2016-0132, variance from AMC 21070880H 3AI to allow a fence partial length of primary front yard setback on Huckleberry Street to exceed a height of 4 feet in the front yard setback, subject to Condition 1.
Mr. Condon, if you could revise your motion to state that it is on both front and secondary. Ms. Ferguson pointed out that part of the case packet was changed to read that to allow a variance from AMC 210708 H3AI to allow a fence the length of the primary and secondary setback. Is that correct, Ms. Ferguson? Because I think this is an important detail, because this defines the length of the variance.
Yes, I'll read it again.
Great, thank you.
It's a variance from AMC 210708 H3A1 and 3 to allow a fence, partial length of primary front yard setback on Huckleberry Street to exceed a height of 4 feet in front yard setback, and to allow a 6-foot fence in the secondary front yard setback.
Sounds good to me.
We'll just...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great. So we have a motion for approval that included staff recommendations?
Recommendation 1, yes.
Just one?
That's all there is.
That's all there is. Great, thank you. You just spoke to it. Mr. Winchester, speak to your second.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I intend to support the motion. I feel like the intent has been met partially and or fully for all of the standards.
Lean into your mic a little bit more, please, sir.
What?
Thank you.
Okay. Can't hear me? Okay.
No.
Boy, I could hear it. Yeah, I intend to support the motion. I believe it's partially and fully.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Any discussion? We'd like to have a hearing and seeing none. We will vote. Do we have enough? If there's a possibility to add some findings, I'll vote, and then we need to, if we could add a couple more findings. I can add a finding that there was public testimony by one neighbor and that they were in support of the case. There was other public comments that came in that were in support of the case, 2 others. And that's about it. Is that?
What you really should do, and I probably should have said this earlier, is that you really should go down for each variance and say it's met or not met. I'm sorry, but for a variance, it's a sort of a very precise process. So if you would indulge me on that one.
So, Mr. Condon, if you could, since you're the main motioner.
Sure.
So there's 4
Yes, findings of fact.
Yep, so page 3.
Under the approval criteria A and so
Right,
forth. Yep.
approval criteria A, we find that that's not applicable to this project.
Perfect.
B, proposed alternative achieves the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. This standard is met. C, the proposed alternative results in benefits to the community that are equivalent to or better than compliance with the subject standard. Find this to be met as standard is met. The variance, if granted, will not adversely affect the use of adjacent property as permitted under this code. This standard is met. Variance, if granted, does not change the character of the zoning district where the property is located, is in keeping with the intent of the code, and does not permit a use not otherwise permitted in the district in which the property lies. The standard is met. Persons with disabilities are provided with access as required by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and reasonable accommodations does not apply. The variance, if granted, does not adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the people in the municipality. That is met. And the final criteria is not applicable to this case.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Condon. So that motion passes. Thank you for coming out tonight. Have a good evening. Just 2 points of order. Thanks, everybody, for coming out for the walkthrough. That was good. And there's a couple of people going to the commissioner training on Wednesday for the APA conference. On Wednesday, on the 15th, I think 13th or 15th, Sunday. Yep, coming up. Thanks for doing that. And that's all I have. Does anybody have any comments? Thank you, Mr. Miller, for chiming in on a land use plan. I think that was helpful. Everybody doesn't know this, but he was behind the scenes working, trying to coordinate with Mr. Davis and getting everything on board so that we had a smooth case tonight. Thank you.
So I have a fast question. Do we have complete commissioners right now?
Oh, no, that was the other question. Right. No, we don't. We have 1 short.
I know someone that, I think Mr. Joe Condon knows her, Krista Phillips. She's a great, perfect person for this commission. She's so, like, community involvement. She's just fit for the commission, and she's an architect, but she's also
another architect.
But more than an architect, I think she will offer her vision towards community, and I mean, she's more than a practice architect. She's more into politics and community, and it will be a great addition for our.
So, Ms. Ferguson, there was another conversation that Ms. Morse brought up about other landscape architects as well.
About other,
landscape architects?
Yes.
That would be good. So what is the process that we could go here? Do we just encourage them to submit an application to
yeah,
you?
they just submit an
Okay.
application. Okay.
So,
Through the chair,
yeah, go ahead.
Monica, I'll send you the link where the application is.
Yeah.
Okay.
It just goes to someone in the mayor's office, and they'll get them before the mayor.
Okay, great. Thank you. Anything else?
Nothing.
Seeing nothing, if I can get a motion to adjourn. Mr. Miller, second by Mr. Winchester. Thanks, everybody. See you next month. Yeah, thanks for